This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring. In this video, I'm going to show you calculator skills on the TI-84 Plus graphing calculator that you need to know in order to do well on the math section of the ACT. Now, this is just going to be part one. It's going to cover some of the more basic operations on the graphing calculator. And there will be a part 2 video to follow it shortly as well, so be on the lookout for that. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how to perform and type in all these operations on the TI-84 Plus graphing calculator. But be aware, I'm generally not going to use any ACT practice problems from official tests or practice tests. If you are looking for more practice in terms of how to use these calculator operations to solve, ACT problems from previously released tests, then please check out my Improve Your ACT Math Score course on Teachable. The address is in the description below, and you should also see it on the screen as well. In that course, one of the 5 sections involves calculator operations, and I go through and demonstrate each of the operations that are going to be shown here and also in part 2, but I specifically go through example problems from official ACT tests that have been previously released, and for some of them I do multiple examples to show you how you could do them, and then at the end of that section, that module, I also have an entire worksheet of more basically practice problems to work through and to practice using these calculator operations to help you solve problems. So please do check that out if you're looking for more practice related to solving specifically ACT problems using these calculator operations. Also, please look in the description below for a link to the worksheet that I'm using and going through during this video. Basically, it's a PDF file. It's 4 total pages, and this video is just going to cover the first 2 pages, and part 2 is going to cover the last 2 pages. So if you look in the description below, you can find a link to that file that you can use for your own reference. Now, even if you don't own a TI-84 Plus model graphing calculator, these skills and operations are still important things to know. So if you have a different model graphing calculator, that's fine. You'll just have to look up exactly how to perform these specific operations on the calculator that you have, either by looking in the manual or by searching for videos on YouTube. Of course, if you like this video and like my other math-related videos, make sure that you click that like button, subscribe to my channel, and of course sign up for notifications so that way you find out whenever I post another video on YouTube. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started, and here are the calculator skills that you need to know.
But life is a dream the calculus could never predict.
Alright, so now let's go ahead and go through some of the important operations that you need to know how to do on a TI-84 Plus model graphing calculator. The model that I'm using is the Plus C, which is basically the newest model. But if you have a regular TI-84 Plus or TI-84 Plus SE Silver Edition, that's fine too. Most of these operations can also be done on a TI-83 as well, but there are a couple that cannot. So first basic operation you know how to do is just convert a decimal to a fraction, because you'll be calculating numbers as you're working through problems, and then the answers will all be as fractions. So all you have to do is, let's say we have whatever decimal, 0.345 is what we come out with. Convert to fraction, we just hit math, we go to option number 1 there, select frac. Okay, that's equivalent to 69 out of 200. Alright, next, related to this, you need to know also how to convert between mixed numbers and fractions. And so what you're going to do in order to do this, and by the way, this is one thing that you cannot do, or is not built into the TI-83, is you're going to use the frac menu that you access by pressing alpha and y equals. So when you go there, see there's several different options. The first one, n over d, is just to type in a fraction. The second one, un/d, is to type in a mixed number. And the third option there, the long thing with multiple expressions, is to convert between a fraction and a mixed number. So for example, let me just quit out here 1 second. Let's say I have a improper fraction and I want to convert that to a mixed number. So the first thing I need to do is just get my fraction on the screen, 55 over 4. And now I can go back to that same menu and we'll just go down to option number 3 here now. Select that and hit enter, and now we have the equivalent mixed number 13 and 3/4. Let's say we wanted to go in reverse. In other words, we were given the mixed number, but we wanted a fraction, so we would just go to alpha y equals, get in the same menu. Now I'm just going to select this third option as well. And notice it automatically pulled down, my answer, my 13 and 3/4. So now when I hit enter, it's going to return the improper fraction form, just 55 over 4. Very good skills to know because you'll have questions where they'll give things in terms of fractions, but the answers will be in mixed numbers, or they'll give things in mixed numbers, but the answers will be in fractions. So knowing how to convert between those is useful. Another thing regarding fractions, knowing how to reduce a fraction is something to be aware of. So if you type the fraction sideways, in other words, if I had 675 divided by 90, let's say that's what my answer came out to be. But obviously that can be simplified. So the way you do that is, again, if you type it sideways, we just press math, and then again, just press the fraction thing, option 1, and then it'll give me the reduced fraction of that, which is 15 over 2. You can also type the fraction in just fraction form. So if I went alpha y equals, I selected option 1, and I just went 675 over 90, hit enter, and I didn't have to go to the math menu then because it was already put in as a fraction. I just hit enter and it automatically reduced it for me. So those are some operations to be aware of, converting between decimals, fractions, mixed numbers, and also reducing a fraction. Next thing that you should be aware of is how to convert between degrees and radians. So whatever mode or whatever unit you want to convert to, in other words, you want to convert to radians, then you need to make sure the calculator is in radians mode. So all we need to do is hit the mode button, and then if you go down here, radian is highlighted, so that's fine. So now I want to convert a number of degrees to radians. So let's say I have 120 degrees and I want to convert that to radians. I need to get the degree symbol, and the way I do that is I hit the second key and then hit apps, and then the first option there has a little degree symbol. Select that. Now when I hit enter, the answer it gives me is going to be in radians. Now, here's the problem. That is just some random number, 2.094, blah, 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 395, whatever. But if you're looking at answers on a test, most likely the answers on the test will be in terms of pi. So here's how we can actually figure out how many pi that is. What we need to do now is, and this isn't on the instruction sheet, this is kind of like a separate little trick, but take your number of radians and divide it by pi. Okay, and you can get pi here by hitting second and the little caret up arrow thing. Then once you've done that, take that decimal, convert it to a fraction, and that will tell you how many pi radians you have. In other words, 120 degrees is equal to 2/3 pi radians, or 2 pi over 3 radians. Okay, again, I'm taking the fraction here, I'm adding the pi to it, and that is my number of radians. Now, let's say you want to go in reverse. In other words, we have radians, we want to convert to degrees. So, let's go back to the mode menu, and now let's change it to degree mode. Then we'll quit back to the home screen. So now what I'm going to do, and I'll just type it in sideways just to save time. Now I'm going to type in the 2 pi divided by 3 radians. And I need to go back to that same menu, it's just that second apps, and then go down to number 3 where there's a little R superscript, and select that. Now when I hit enter, it will give me the answer in degrees because I am in degree mode. So I get 120 degrees, and that matches what we just found in our original calculation. So that's how to convert between degrees to radians and radians to degrees on the graphing calculator. Now, so let's go ahead and take a look at some other operations you need to know how to do. So absolute value and how to enter that in for evaluating expressions. You just go to the math menu, and then you go to num, and it's the first option there, ABS. When you hit enter, then you get the nice absolute value bars, and you can just type, whatever the expression is inside of it. 8 minus 5 squared, whatever, and then hit enter, and it gives us, just what the numerical answer is. So if you need absolute value as part of evaluating an expression, then, that's how you get to it. Next, we have the LCM, or lowest or least common multiple, and the GCD, or it's technically greatest common factor, but on the calculator they use GCD, of two numbers. So if you want to find the lowest or least common multiple of two numbers, all you do is go to the math menu, and then go to num, go down to number 8, LCM, and now we could type in the two numbers. So let's say 15, and you want to make sure you separate them with a comma, which is right there. Let's say 15 and 20. And then go ahead and hit enter. Okay, so the lowest or least common multiple of 15 and 20 is 60. But now let's say the actual problem had three numbers that you were given. So you were given 15, you were given 20, and you were also given, let's say, like 39 as the third number. On the calculator, you can only enter in two numbers at a time. So what you have to do is instead find the LCM of the first two, and then go ahead and find the LCM of the answer to that problem and the third number. So I'm going to use second entry now just to copy it down so I don't have to go back to the math menu. So now I would type in 60 because that was my answer I got from the previous thing. And then I'm going to type in the third number, which is 39. So now I get the final answer of 780. That's the least common multiple between 15 and 20 and 39. So if you have three numbers, you do two of them first, and then do it again with the answer from the first two and the third number. Now, if you want to find the GCD, or really it's GCF, greatest common factor, between two numbers, we go back to the same screen. We go to math, we go to num, and now we go down to option number 9. And I'll just use the same two numbers of 15 and 20. Remember, the GCD, or GCF really, is just the largest number that divides into or is a factor of both our given numbers. So over these two, it's just going to be 5. Okay, and that's it. Next, let's talk about how you can find the remainder when you're dividing two numbers doing long division. So this comes up on the ACT a lot, where you have repeating patterns or repeating sequences. It'll give you maybe a repeating decimal like 0.1372, okay, and those 4 digits repeat. And it'll say something like, what digit is in the 275th spot after the decimal? And so basically what you need to do there is you have to divide 275 by 4. And the reason you divide it by 4 is because in that example there are four digits that repeat. I mean, you divide it by however many items there are in the pattern. So if you were doing something with days of a week, you would divide by 7. Or like months in a year, you would divide by 12. But anyways, when you're doing that division, what you want is the remainder. So you can do it out by hand, the way you learned how to do it in elementary school, but the calculator can just give us that answer for us. So we go to math, we go to num, we go all the way down, just past where we were, down here to remainder. Now you're just going to type in the two numbers, the larger numbers going first. So I had said in that example, what's in the 275th digit place? And then put a comma, and then put the number we're dividing by. and then hit enter. So the remainder here is 3, and that means just in that example problem I created just now, whatever is third in the pattern would be the answer to that question. So if it was 0.1372, then in the 275th spot it would be the 7, I guess. Yeah, 0.1372, so the 7 was third. That'll give you the remainder again for dividing two numbers using long division. Next thing that you can also do is to basically find the value of a function, and specifically from its graph. So if you have to evaluate a function for a bunch of different numbers, it might be easier sometimes to go ahead and like graph the function out. I'm just going to pick an example here, maybe 2x squared minus 3x minus 5. So we have a nice quadratic function here. And now the point is, you can, if rather than having to type in the expression, multiple times and changing out the x values, we can just go second and hit trace, go to the calculate menu, select option 1, value, and now just type in where we want to evaluate it. So I'm going to evaluate it. Let's say I'm going to check and see what's equal to -2. Okay, looks like it's equal to 9. All right, now I'm going to check it at -1. And it looks like there it's actually equal to 0. And then if you want to check other values, you could go keep doing that as well. The point is, sometimes with complicated functions, it's easier to get to evaluate it this way rather than being out at the home screen and having to even retype the entire expression with a different x value or copy down the expression. One thing also to be aware of, if you're trying to do this, so like let's say I go to calc here, I go to value, and I'm trying to evaluate it at like -50. Okay, I get an error. It says error invalid, quit or go to. The way you fix this is you have to go and adjust your window settings on the graph. So first, I'm just going to get out of here. So you hit window, and then when you bring this up, what you have to do is you have to change your xmin or xmax values so that where you're evaluating the function is between those numbers. So if I want to evaluate at -50, I'm just going to move this out to at least -50. I mean, I could probably go a little bit further to the left of it, but we'll just keep it like that. Whatever, I'll just make this +50 just so it's symmetric. And now once I've adjusted those xmin and xmaxes, so first I'll just have to redraw the graph. And then once that's done, I can go back to the calculate menu and go to value. And now if I type in -50, okay, now I get my answer. It looks like 5,145. There is no error, whereas previously there was. Okay, so now move on, take a look at a couple more operations you should know how to do on the graphing calculator. So first one is to find, next one I want to talk about is basically finding a 0 or an x-intercept, or basically a root of a function or graph. So we'll just do it with this function we already have in here. I'm just going to initially just set the zoom window back to the standard values just so we have a little bit better picture of it. Okay, so our two zeros or our two x-intercepts, you should be able to see them on the screen here. It's where the 2 points where the graph crosses the x-axis. If I want to find them, I just go to second and trace to get to the calculate menu, and then I go to number 2, 0. So I'm going to look at the one that's on the right first. So it says left bound, so all you have to do is make sure that your little cursor is to the left of the point you're looking at, or here left of where it crosses the axis. Then hit enter. Then for right bound, I'll move it just to the right of it, and now it's also above it. And then for guess, I'll just go in the middle as close as possible to the intersection point. We hit enter. Okay, now we have it. So the 0 or the x-intercept or the root, or one of them for this function, is going to be 2.5 or 5/2. And now if we want to find the other one on the left, we would just repeat the same process. And I think with this one we already found earlier in the video, it just turns out to be -1. So that's how you can find a 0, an x-intercept, or a root of a function by graphing it. Next thing we want to take a look at is finding the maximum or minimum value of a function. So we can actually do that again on the same quadratic function we were just looking at, 2x squared minus 3x minus 5. So we go back to the calculate menu, we hit second and trace. Now notice this graph has a minimum, so we'd select option 3 for minimum. If it opened down, then it would have a maximum and we'd choose option 4. And this process is basically going to be the exact same thing we just did for the 0. So we move the cursor to the left of the minimum point, hit enter for our left bound, then move it to the right of the minimum point for our right bound. Then we go in the middle for a guess, basically as close to the minimum point as possible. We hit enter, okay, and there we get the minimum value. Notice that for some of these, due to rounding and stuff, it might be like slightly off. For example, if you took this quadratic function and you found its vertex, because the minimum is occurring at the vertex, whether by using the formula or whether by putting it into vertex form, okay, the actual x value you would get would be 3/4, which is just 0.75. But notice here, it's like 0.7500003, so it's a little bit off. So just be aware of that. If you see something that looks very close to a common decimal, like 0.4999999 is most likely 0.5 or 1/2, then just be aware of that. So here it's just going to be 0.75 for the x value, and the y value it looks like is -6.125, I believe. So that's the point, which is gives us the minimum value for this function or graph. Now, just be aware, the actual minimum value is the y value. Okay, you know, the -6.125 is if the question asked what the actual minimum value of the function was, that's what your answer would be. Okay, next thing we want to take a look at is finding where two curves intersect, or this could also be used to solve a system of equations. Now, we actually don't need to do it with two lines. We could do it with this quadratic function we have, and we can just throw another line in there. Like I'll just throw in the line x minus 2. And so we'll graph those out. So there are two different points where those intersect. The way we can find those intersection points, we just go to second and trace. To go back to the calculate menu, we go down to option 5, intersect. Now it'll say first curve, and it's selected the quadratic function that I have in y1. Just hit enter. It asks now for the second curve, and this is the line that I had in y2. Just hit enter. And now for a guess, I just move the cursor over as close to the intersection point as possible, and I hit enter. Now, this one is not the intersection point are not nice integer values or nice whole numbers. Instead, they're just whatever random decimals. So most questions on, say, an ACT are not going to be like this, but instead they're probably going to be whole numbers, instead. But that's the basic process of how you'd find the intersection of two curves. Another thing just to be aware of, too, is if you are going to use this to solve a system of equations, you have to put both the lines into slope-intercept form. Because to graph them, they have to be y equals everything else on the right. So for example, let's say, just to show you a quick example with lines, let's say I did x plus, let's do negative x plus 2, along with x minus 2. So we graph those two lines out. Now this one, I mean, we can pretty much see exactly where they're going to intersect, but we can just go through the process, and we'll get the answer in no time. So we go down to intersect, first curve, second curve, enter after each, move over to the intersection point. There we go. The x value is 2, the y value is 0. So basically, at the x-intercept for each of them. is where they intersect. So that's how I'd use it if you had a system of linear equations. All right. Let's talk next now about how you can actually solve a system of equations using matrices. So this is a little bit complicated, but it's actually not that bad. Basically, what we're going to do is first I'm going to quit out here to the home screen, and this is a method you can use when the equations are given in standard form, meaning like whatever x plus whatever y equals whatever. Okay? So when they're already in slope-intercept form, it's probably easier to graph them. But if they're not in slope-intercept form, you can use this method as well to solve them. However, one thing to be aware of, if you try to use this method, it does not work on the no solution or infinite solution cases. Meaning, if you have two parallel lines, that's a no solution case, meaning there's no intersection. This matrix method will not work. It'll give you an error. Same thing if it's an infinite solution case, which really means you have the same line twice. So this method only works if you have the two lines actually intersecting at the same point. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to type in a matrix. The way that you do that is you press alpha and then you press the zoom key. And the first one, for the first matrix, you want to have 2 and 2 selected. Then just hit OK. And now you have a blank matrix. And the numbers that you're going to plug in here are the coefficients, or the numbers in front of the x's and y's, or the a's and b's, whatever the letters are. So I'm just going to pick, I'm actually going to look at that last problem that we just did, on the y equals screen. So the first line, if you rearrange this, if you move the x over to the other side, it actually turns into x plus y equals 2. So let me just quit back to here. So I would put 1 because it's 1x, and then I would put 1 because it's 1y. And now, the second line down here where it was y equals x minus 2, if you rearrange that and you put the x and y on the same side, so if I subtract the x over, then it would be negative x plus y equals negative 2. So that means I would put down here negative 1 because that's for the negative x, and then positive 1 because that's for the positive y. And that's all we put initially in our first matrix. So we just fill in the coefficients on the x's and y's and nothing else. Then we press the x to the negative first button. Okay, so this is just the first step, that we've done so far. Now the second step, we're going to do another matrix, but this matrix is going to have 2 rows but only 1 column. So go up here to the column thing, select 1, hit enter, and then click OK. And now here's where you're going to put the 2 numbers that are on the right side of the equations. So the top one was positive 2, the bottom one was negative 2. Once you type that in, just use your arrows, move all the way to the right, and now hit enter. And here's your answer. The top number is whatever the first variable is, which in this case is x. The bottom number is whatever the second variable is, which in this case is y. So we get the solution of 2, 0, which is the exact same thing that we got when we graphed it out. All right. So again, this is a method to solve a system of equations it's called basically using matrix properties or using matrix algebra, by entering in the coefficients and typing them in with in a specific method and manner. And usually this is most helpful when they are already in standard form, ax plus by equals c. Now, the last topic for this video, because it's kind of like a part 1 of calculator operations to know, is performing operations on complex numbers. So complex numbers are the numbers, that have little i's in them, like 2 plus 3i, 4 minus 5i, things like that. So you can perform any operation on complex numbers, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, all on the calculator without doing any work other than just typing the problem in. So the first thing to do is go to the mode menu and make sure that your calculator is set to A plus BI down here. If not, highlight it. If it is, ignore it, quit out, back out to the home screen. And now you just type in the problem. So let's say the problem we had was 3 minus 2. Now to get the I, you just hit second and the period down here. Okay, 3 plus 2I squared. Okay, normally if you're doing that by hand, you'd have to write it out twice and then do FOIL, and then you'd have to combine like terms and simplify. But we just punch it in the calculator, hit enter, boom, there's our answer. 5 minus 12I. Let's say you had a division problem now. So let's say you had, 4 minus I divided by 2 plus I. Okay, so now we just go ahead, we hit enter, we get our final answer. The only thing to keep in mind is most likely on the test, the answers are going to be fractions, not decimals like this. So all we need to do now is go back to the math menu, select option 1 to fraction, hit enter. Okay, now we have it in fraction form, 7/5 minus 6/5 I, or you might see it on the test as 7 minus 6I all over 5. Okay, just a slightly different way to write what we see on the calculator. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is basically part 1 of calculator operations, on the TI-83, TI-84 Plus that you need to know how to do on the math section of the ACT. Please, again, like this video, subscribe to the channel, sign up for notifications, and if you have any questions or comments on any of these operations, please feel free to leave a comment down below, or reach out to me, on one of my other social media channels, Facebook, Reddit, or Instagram.